So I have a degree in art therapy. So
Yes.
I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago,
Okay.
and University of Oregon. So I've taken art classes both at both those places.
Okay.
But like I said, I'm a little rusty.
Well, yeah, but it might pick up. The process that I use is it's a paint along. So I do the first phase, you do the first phase, you show me what you're doing and so forth, and ask
Okay.
as many questions as you have. Don't feel
Okay.
and
Yeah,
there's
I've
no silly
always
question.
loved watercolor, but I don't know as much about all the techniques.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of hoping to just gain a little bit more technical knowledge.
Okay. Okay. Morning, Laura. How are you doing?
Morning. Good. How are you?
Good. How's the snow over there?
We got maybe like 3 inches yesterday, and it'll probably snow a bit more this weekend. So it's okay. It's
That's
it's it's fine.
that's about what we got in the last
Okay.
couple of days, but we have not been inundated with snow this year so far. But the snowmobiles are running well, so that's good for the economy. Okay, there we go. Okay, um, today we're using ultramarine blue, sap green, burnt sienna, yellow medium, and a brown madder. If you don't have brown madder, you can mix up burnt sienna with alizarin crimson to come up a reasonable facsimile. Um, the process that I'm going to use today, and Catherine, if you have any questions, please ask. Um, I'm going to be working wet on wet, which means wetting the surface of the paper and applying wet pigment, of course. Sometimes I'll work wet on dry, and it takes maybe a little bit more finesse to make that watercolor move, but I'm going to have a lot of soft edges. You want to have you want to keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can, because you can always sharpen them up. And we're working from background to foreground, always. And that is a process that is a continuation. You always go back to the background after your layers dry and come forward again. So this is the process that we're looking at this particular point. Let me get this light off the paper here in the corner because that's going to influence everything. We got a doorway in the back here that has a tendency of letting too much light in. There we go. Goes back out to the woods and the deck here. So anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the surface, going back to background, foreground. You're working from light to dark, large to small areas, background to foreground, and you're working your colors more intense at the beginning. In other words, more pure, and you can gray things down as you go through it. This happens to be a scene in West Virginia and Appalachia, that is an old coal mining town that most of them have gone under, unfortunately. There's a lot of abandoned houses out there. So, all right, here we go. I'm going to take the sponge here. You could take your brush or a sponge or whatever, and I'm going to wet down the sky here. I'm going to wet down around the houses because I want to maintain the integrity of the houses. I'm not making this sopping wet, but I'm wetting down a good portion of it. And this portion of the house, I'm going to wet too. But I don't want to have everything flowing every which way, but I do want the softer edges. And I'm going to pick up my larger brush here, which is a large 3/4 inch cat tongue. And I'm going to take the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to slightly gray it with a little bit of yellow, not much, and a little bit of the green. So we get this slightly grayed down, and I'm going to start by putting in and allowing this to flow. This is one of the best benefits of watercolor, is allowing it to flow where it wants to. Let it do its magic. And eventually you will control it a little bit more as you move through it. So I'm adding a little bit more yellow, and I'm adding that down in here. And I'm just allowing the pigment to float. I'm kind of taking my time, but this is about as fast as you'll move is at the beginning of a watercolor. Then you slow your process down. A little bit more blue in here. And I'm going to take the original mixture up in here, and I'm going to create a little bit of some movement of some clouds in here. So while it's still wet, you can go ahead and you can go apply the watercolor and not have to worry about blooms and so forth.
What's a bloom?
Bloom is when you have the wetness pushing away or going into a dry area, and it is making the watercolor pile up in one area, and it creates a sharper edge. So I have the burnt sienna here, and I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue, a little bit of the brown madder, some more ultramarine blue, and it's kind of a brownish. I'm going to add a little bit more red to this. And I'm going to go through the background here with this stand of trees. I'm going to paint around the buildings to maintain its integrity, although I will block in some of it as we move through it. I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna and some ultramarine blue to this mixture, because as we come forward over here, it's closer to us and it's going to get a little bit darker. So I try to incorporate as much of the shapes as I can without painting around too much, but I will also go through the buildings once we get this in here. And I don't worry about bleeding in. That's kind of insignificant at this point. But I am going to cover the front of the building, since that's a dark, like so. And then I'm going to take the green with the yellow, and I'm going to start way back here. I'm going to drag some of this grayed color in a little bit, because things are grayer and less intense in the background. And I'm going to start adding a little bit more intense color as it comes forward. And everything is going to be very soft in this. Now I am watching the sky. As long as it's still glistening, we're still fine. I can go back into it and work a little bit. There's some more yellow coming in here, and some of the green, and a little bit of the blue. I'm going to enter that right in here so that there's not just one color, one value. And it'll come across the front here. I painted around the road also to kind of maintain its integrity. And I'm going to add some brownish green in here. Now, I'm going to still leave that alone. I'm going to come up, I'm going to clean my palette here a little bit, my mixing area. And I'm going to grab the ultramarine blue again, and a little bit of the burnt sienna. And I'm going to come in here again one more time and add those darker clouds there that gives a little bit of a mood that I was looking for. If you've ever been in West Virginia, you'll realize in certain areas it is very, very poor, but it has the character that I look for in a painting. I love old buildings and so forth, but we're trying to get this to just pull together, and I am going to I'm going to wipe the brush off on a paper towel down below here. And I'm going to pull that color into the roof here. And I'm still waiting for this to dry just a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit more brown to this blue here. And I'm just going to go ahead and block this in so that it will kind of fuse in, allow that grass to come in on the road. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow with this grayish color. And I'm going to go ahead, because a white structure will reflect colors around it, reflect it, where a dark subject will absorb the color and you don't see as much of it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to block the bottom of that house in. So the only thing that I have that's left on the paper, and I want to pull that out just a little bit with paper towel, is that light roof in the background here. So I have gotten 98% of the paper covered with pigment. I wet the paper first. I took the ultramarine blue and a little bit of green and some yellow first wash across. Then I came down here with more of the burnt sienna and the ultramarine, and allowing it to bleed up. We can separate things later. I'm not worried about that. But I washed it across from a little bit warmer and lighter over here, darker and a little bit cooler here, because that will push out this warm. Then I made up different mixtures of the yellow and the green and a little bit of the blue, and I just allowed it to move in through here. I am going to take the paper towel here and pull up this excess water at the bottom. And then I just washed in over this, allowing the colors to kind of blend together. The only thing I really didn't touch was the roof. But I am going to go in here and I'm going to press down while this is still wet to pull out that house, because that is really not white. The lightest thing in the whole picture is this, which is going to be toned down because it sticks out like a sort of thumb. So you can go ahead and start painting. And if you have any questions, please yell. There's no such thing as a silly question. And I'm still going to pull up a little bit of this at the bottom and a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I got a little bit of a slant on my table. And I'm going to take the toothbrush and put it underneath there so it lies more horizontal. And I'm right here to answer any questions. And Catherine, it's going to take a while to get used to this.
Okay.
So don't be afraid of ruining a piece of paper. I ruined a lot over the years.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a landfill in my name someplace. Not yet, it's still wet. It glistens too much then. Now, the one thing, Catherine, is that you do get a video of this within a couple days so that you can go back over it. You can finish your painting if you don't finish it, or you can redo the painting.
Okay.
So there is a net.
And the start to finish packet.
And you get the start to finish packet of everything.
The steps.
The steps.
Awesome.
I take pictures at each interval, so you'll get the still pictures of everything. And Janet's not here today. She had an eye appointment. So we have 4 in class. And Judy, you have to leave in about an hour?
I'm actually, I have to leave about 11. So,
Oh, okay.
Dale, what I'm doing is I'm just watching, taking notes,
All right.
and then,
You'll paint it when you get the video.
yeah, that's what
Okay.
I'm going to do.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry I have to miss today.
Oh, that's life. Life does get in the way, unfortunately, once in a while.
Yeah, right. But you send that out usually on a Sunday, start to finish?
I'm trying to get it out on Saturday.
We're trying to get it out on Saturday.
Oh, okay. Good.
I have got a workshop this weekend in Annapolis, Maryland, but it's a Zoom workshop, so it might be.
It'll be on Friday, probably.
It'll be on Friday. In other words, tomorrow.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, great.
And this is way the waterfall turned out last week after work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was going to tell you, you do the video and then you come back and you do some more things to it. That is so helpful.
Yeah, that was my wife's idea because I
Yeah,
said,
I
I'm
like
going to go
that.
back into it, take pictures,
Uh-huh.
but it's nice to have the explanation hearing it instead of having it written out.
So we're gonna do that all the time
So
now.
we will do that all the time now if I go
Yeah,
back into it
I like
afterwards. This one
And then
took a little bit longer to finish, but you got the idea.
I put those extra rocks in, and actually I ended up putting more than 2 because 2 looked kind of, on mine, it looked kind of
Okay.
weird. So I think I
Well,
put a couple more
sometimes it's
smaller
just
ones.
it's a call that you do while you're painting it that I'm going to change this, change that, or add this, add that.
Yeah.
But that's a call that I usually do. And I was looking at it, and I'm going, I need a rock up there, but I don't want it to be an obvious rock.
Yeah, they kind of blended into the background,
Yeah.
but it really added quite a bit. I thought it added quite a bit to that picture.
Yeah. Yeah, I was happy with the outcome of it. And sometimes it's not possible to finish everything to the nth degree
Yeah.
in the middle of
Right.
a Zoom class, but I think it's important that you see how I finish things, what I'm thinking of, what I'm doing.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see something, you'll walk away and then you come back and you see something.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Mhm.
All the time. I would sit in my studio I'll sit here too, but I'll have a cup of coffee and look at it, stand back, look at it from a distance, and then come back to it, looking at 1 or 2 things that I need to address. And then I will do that and look at it again. I think the longest I've ever looked at a painting was a year. Something I didn't like about it, and I finally identified it where Mary Lee said, you should enter that in a contest. I says, no, there's something I need to do. And she didn't see it, but I did eventually. And I did win an award on it, which was nice.
Good.
It was a minor thing, but something bothered me. I couldn't put my finger on it.
Now, Dale, on this picture, when you get to this point, are you letting it dry before you do the next?
Yeah, you have to let it dry totally before attempting. And like I say, I very seldom use a hair dryer when working without doing a Zoom class, of course, but I will use a hair dryer on it. But I have to let that area dry and that area dry for the fact that I would be taking the risk of pushing the watercolor into a dry area with the dryer. So I have to be, I could probably do this, but this one up here, I'm not so sure of. So that's why I'm leaving it alone at this point. temptation is to go ahead and do it if you feel like you're in a rush, but you shouldn't be in a rush.
This is my Zoom class day. Just watching the first half hour. He sends it out later. I can catch up.
How you doing, Catherine?
I'm doing. I don't know that all my color mixing is as on point, but I'm doing.
Okay. What we're shooting for, there's 4 properties of color, and the first one is value, which is the most important one. If your values are not right, in other words, your darks are not dark enough, your lights are not light enough, that's the most important thing. And then you have the intensity and temperature. And the temperature can be, a little bit this way or a little bit that way, long as it's cooler and grayer as it recedes back, and it's warmer and more intense as it is up in the foreground. So this is how we create distance in temperature-wise. Colors are more intense in the foreground if we're going to have a lot of intensity, and they're less intense and grayer in the background. But if you have the first 3 of the properties correct, the color can be off and nobody would know.
Okay.
Just like you see a movie poster, all the values and intensities and temperatures are correct, but the color's off, but it still looks correct because they try to make it look fancy.
Those fancy graphic designers.
Graphic designers, illustrators, even fine artists too. I am going to tempt the hairdryer at this point, so hang on if you have any questions. Get a picture of this, and they'll see how all of you are doing. When you feel you are done and you've covered everything, that's when you leave it alone and don't play with it. Because that's how I ruined a lot as a student.
Okay.
And when you feel it's dry enough, you can hold it up and let me see what you have. How did you find me, Catherine? You just went to the Palette and Chisel, or were you looking at different sites?
I did. I was looking for a place I could go in Chicago. My youngest just entered a toddler program, so I have some morning time, and then watercolor has always interested me. And then I was planning to go in person actually, but then Zoom is actually very convenient. So I was like, well, this is a great fit for me right now.
Yeah, I can understand. I used to teach in person for 16 years at the Palette, And when the pandemic hit, things kind of shut down, of course. And then the riots started down there, and there were certain things going on, and decided, well, I'm going to do Zoom classes. And then my wife and I moved up here 2.5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So we made the big move after 33 years in our house in Northwest Indiana and moved 33 years of stuff with us. That
Art
was
stuff.
art stuff mostly, and still unpacking.
Stuff accumulates, that's for sure.
Yeah. But we owned my parents had a house up on a lake up here. We sold that and we bought a log cabin in the woods that was newer, bigger, but it needed renovation. So it was renovated by the time, well before we moved in, but we've been making improvements as we go along.
That sounds very relaxing. Well, I mean, maybe not the process.
It is.
Sounds lovely.
It's much more quiet up here in the woods. We have neighbors through the woods, but it is a quiet thing going on.
We're living back in Mayberry.
Yeah, we're living in Mayberry at this point.
Nice.
How you doing, Laura?
I'm doing good. I'm almost done. I'll hold it up shortly.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, that's where you want to be. Very good. When I started off in watercolor, I was terrible. I just took oil painting for a year and tried to understand more color theory and so forth. But when I got to watercolor class, I was terrible.
I always hated oil painting. I just couldn't control it. Everything just ended up really smooth and blended together, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, it can happen.
Yeah.
Okay, Catherine, is it possible for hold yours up without it falling off the paper?
A little too wet. I'm not totally sure.
All right, you do it real quick then.
Okay.
This is what I have so far.
All right, not bad at all. Good. All right.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to start again so that Judy sees a little bit of the second phase before she has to leave us.
Got about 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll see what I can do, Judy.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to go into the background again and come forward. I'm going to use my Chinese calligraphy brush here that has become a favorite in the last year. I don't need to do anything with the sky at this point, but I am going to go back into the trees in the background. There's a ridge back here. So I'm going to take the ultramarine blue and a little bit of the brown matter. Gives me kind of a grayed down violet look to it. And I have a mountainous ridge back here, like so. And then I want to add a little bit more blue to that in one area here. Then I'm going to start with the trees. Now, the trees have a lot of burnt sienna in them, but I'm going to add a little bit of brown matter and ultramarine blue to them. I don't overmix the color here, Catherine. I allow, when I put down a brush stroke, it allows me to have various colors show up all at once. I'm going to dry the brush off a little bit, and I'm using the side of the brush. And every 3-4 brush strokes, I'm going to change the color or the temperature or the value of things. And if I'm finding that I'm having a little bit too much of a hard edge up here, I can rinse the brush out and take it and soften with a damp brush, and that will soften up some of it. Doesn't have to be all of it, but you want to vary your edges a little bit. So I'm adding a little bit more burnt sienna. I added a little bit more ultramarine blue, And like I said, every 3, 5, 6 brush strokes, I'm changing the color or the temperature. So I end up with a variety because you don't want the same color shooting all the way across on one particular item. I'm not worried about the trees that are shooting up. I'm going to add a little bit more blue because back here in the middle of the painting is further away. So I'm adding a little bit more blue to make it evident that it is going to fall back for us. Then I'm going to add a lot more burnt sienna to this as it comes over the house. Dry the brush off on paper towel and then kind of dry brush it in. And this can be gone over anywhere from 2 to 3 times. But I want as much color as I can possibly get because I can always tone it down if need be. And I'm painting very carefully around the roof of the house to maintain its integrity. And if I dry brush this, I'm going to use a little bit of yellow with the burnt sienna. I'm getting the texture of the paper. I'm using indigo paper, which is I can strongly recommend. Some people take some time to get used to it, but it does work well. And you can see that going along the ridge here, it's a little bit different as I move so that I don't have the same color, same value, same temperature. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the, where'd it go? Oh, it's underneath here. I'm going to take the toothbrush. If you don't have a toothbrush, you can get one by next week. This is a cheap toothbrush. And I'm going to put,
So,
it's a hard toothbrush.
what is that?
Yep. And I'm going to add a little bit of flavoring in over here and down here with the toothbrush. That way I'm not disturbing the pigment that's on the paper. You can always run and get your husband's toothbrush, just clean it after you're done with it. So you can see what's happening with this. I'm going to hold this up a little bit closer. Okay, so you're seeing a lot of color variations going on. Now, so I don't have a hard edge on the green and so forth. I'm going to bring some green in, lots of green, and I'm going to add yellow to it. And I'm going to take this little bit of burnt sienna that's there, and I'm going to add a lot of water to lighten the value. And when I put it up against the tree line that's up there, it is going to soften to a certain extent. And I still have to bring the tree line down a little bit. Right in here. But I'm basically dry brushing in what's here. And then I'm adding some other values in here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to add a lot of water to it because this gets lighter and softer as it goes back. And then I'm going to add a little bit more in here. Now, dry brushing this, I'm allowing the first layer of pigment to show through, which is what I really want. It shows a little bit of depth that way. So I took a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm adding it up in here. And I'm going to go behind the house and add more burnt sienna to it, a little bit of ultramarine blue. It's a little bit darker off over here and a little bit warmer. So I'm doing a very quick dry brush of this. going to pull up some of the color I previously used, and I'm going to go right up against the house and allow this edge up in here to soften out. I'll sharpen it later. But I'm overlapping the house with some of this greenery. And as I come down along the road here, it's going to be lighter, a little bit warmer. And back here, I'm going to leave that alone because I don't want it to kind of fuse in there. And I'm going to allow the grass to kind of come into the road here a little bit more. Now, while that's starting to dry, I'm going to take the toothbrush and I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue, mix it in here, and I'm going to give this texture right away. And I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow straight, and I want to add it in right over here. This will give this a little bit of warmth over here. And I will prop this up closer to the camera when I'm done. But I never paint the photograph, Catherine. I always paint the painting. So I'm allowing things to tell me what it needs as opposed to leaving out the unimportant. So I'm going to take a little bit of brown here, mix it in with the green and so forth, and I'm going to paint or block in the front of this cabin or house. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it. So that this melds with the rest of the painting here. And I don't need to cover the whole thing, but I am going to take a little bit of almost pure burnt sienna and then stop because this now has actually dried enough I can paint up against it. It won't bleed in. And add a little bit of pure burnt sienna up here on the roof. So you can see it's really not moving anywhere. Now, if you need a feel to lighten it up, that's why we have paper towels. Like so. And I'm going to stop. So I'm going to put this up on my water bucket here so you get a closer look. Judy, have a good day. Good trip. I know, she just left. And I'm cleaning off my palette, which is important. And you may want to change your water every so often when it gets real dirty. But right now, it's probably not that dirty. But you can see the amount of color I have going in on this, which doesn't totally relate to the photograph, but I'm not concerned about it because I'm not painting the photograph. Did you have a toothbrush, Catherine?
I do. It's does it matter if it's like soft or hard or what's your?
The harder the toothbrush, the better. Usually what I go to the dollar store and pick up something for what is it, $1.25 now or something. But as long as you have a toothbrush, and what I'm doing with it is I am taking it and I fill it up with color and I use my index finger and I simply pull back on it and I point and I shoot.
Okay.
Okay. You don't need a lot of water on it, mostly just pigment.
Okay.
But you can see how fast things start to come together. I'll be right back. Don't go away. Okay, I'm back if you have any questions. Catherine, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's a complicated one.
S.
So it's like it's as if you're saying a C and the silent J. So
Okay.
Siata.
Siata. Okay.
Yeah, it's Finnish.
That's a cool name.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my last name prior to getting married also was not easy to pronounce. So, but I like it, even though it's kind of a tricky one.
Yeah, a little bit.
If you don't have a calligraphy brush per se, what would you recommend for to
If you
use
don't
in
have what kind of brush?
the calligraphy brush?
A number 9 or 10 round.
Okay.
That brush there, I've used different Chinese calligraphy brushes over the years, and I have a number 12 round that I used to use. This has taken the place of it. Um, the reason why I like it, it's a little bit longer hair like this, and I got a set of these. My wife bought me for Christmas a couple years ago with horsehair. This is squirrel. There's wolf, and then there's something else, goat. They all act a little bit differently. I haven't used the other ones yet, to be truthful, but these are relatively inexpensive brushes. She bought me a set of 4 for how much was it? About 30?
It was $34.
$34 from Cheap Joe.
No, Rosemary.
Rosemary. I'm sorry, Rosemary. Rosemary makes some wonderful brushes.
And I have to do the disclaimer. We're affiliate members of Rosemary, so every time somebody buys a brush through his website or the worksheet that we have, he gets a couple pennies towards a new brush. So I had to do that.
I know.
But we'll include we just updated his worksheet on his brushes, his selection through Rosemary, except for one. And I'll include that in the start to finish email.
Oh, snow now.
Is it?
Yeah.
No.
That's what it looks like to me.
The wind's blowing.
And the sun's up. Go figure.
Go figure.
But the idea when you start off painting on this, Catherine, is to get a good imprint of the value patterns and the subject matter as quickly as you can without making it look too distinctive. Just
Okay.
the values get down. As you saw what I did in the first part, I got the values down, I got the color down, and then that gives you a basis to start working on top of. So nothing is finished until the end. And your process slows down as you go through the painting. It's not as quick as it is at the beginning.
And is it possible to get your paper like too wet? Is that kind of something you feel out more with
Yeah.
time?
There are a couple things that cannot be taught. You have to experience them. Number one is the pigment water ratio of how much pigment, how much water. That has to be experienced. And the second is how it dries. Your darks will dry lighter. So learning how to anticipate how much pigment you're putting in to your mixture is how much dark or darker value you're going to have. That is experience also. That was probably, those two things threw me for a loop as a student. But the instructor who I had was Irving Shapiro, who was president director of the American Academy at the time. By the end of the year, I was doing fairly well. And a year later, he hired me as an instructor there, and I taught there for 22 years.
So I won't base everything on this first painting.
Never base anything on your first piece. Every one will be an improvement.
You didn't tell her the best part about school.
Oh, the best part about going to college is I met my wife.
Oh,
We started dating on a bet that I lost, but really I won.
oh. Love that.
But just to give you a little background, which I know Laura's heard this, I think. I was a plumber, apprentice plumber for 3 years, and which meant I was in the hole digging, lifting, and so forth. But during that time, I lost 80% of my sight, and I had a cyst on the optic nerve, and I ended up having brain surgery in 1974. And I had to learn how to walk again, climb stairs, and how to learn how to spell things. Even my own name I had problem with, but it all came back.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I don't take the failures of the watercolor too seriously. Everything is a learning curve. So I don't worry about if I mess up a watercolor. I learn from it. And experimenting with things. I took all my old paintings at one point and see if what I could learn by trying to revive them or whatever the case would be, which was probably one of the best teachers I've had outside of school, is seeing what I could do with them, what works, what doesn't work. I threw out a lot of them though. And I still throw them out here and there.
Like last week?
Yeah, last week I cut the former week up in half, but I redid that and showed the students on the corrections, but I cut the other one in half. Yes, Laura's.
I was shocked when you did that.
Yeah, occasionally my wife says, don't do that, but I have to because you don't want it going out of your hands into the public domain anywhere.
Or 200 years from now, them saying, this is Dale's greatest painting.
No. My boss and teacher, one of the students bought a watercolor in an antique shop on Melrose Avenue, I think, in Chicago. She bought it for $75, and it was done back in the 50s and early on in his career. and he asked to see it, and she went to the locker and got it, showed it to him, and he says, "I'll pay you $150 for it." Well, as a student, when you're poor, she just naturally took the money. Well, I went into his office later on. They asked him a question about something, and it was in the corner, torn in half. And that just blew my mind away. But you'll find that every painter, whether oil, watercolor, acrylic, whatever the pastel, everybody interprets the subject a little bit differently. And I try to keep my teachings to where things are more understandable, not to get too technical at one point or another until they're ready for it. Because otherwise it's kind of self-defeating on the student. So when you feel you're done, that's where you put down your brush and sit on your hands. I can't tell you how many watercolors I ruined early on by chasing the watercolor around the paper. I need to get a picture of this. I think I did, but I'm not sure. Nope, I didn't get a picture. And you always, Catherine, you always feel the painting with the back of your hand to see if it's dry or not. This still has a coolness to it. I might have to use the hair dryer because the palm of your hand has oil on it. You don't want to be doing this.
Okay.
Because
Okay,
eventually,
I think I'm done with that layer.
okay, good. The only thing that you need to do is to this edge back here, see if you can take a damp brush and soften it, because the harder edge would be up in here and really only one side or the other. But soften this back here a little,
Okay.
because you just want that to fall back into the foliage, into the background.
I think I'm sort of at a stopping point.
All right. Is it dry enough to hold up?
I think so.
Okay.
I think
Okay. All right. Hold the painting up just a little. There we go. That's pretty good. You can probably darken up the front of this building here, Catherine, with a little bit of the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue. It's not that dark, but it's a little bit darker than what you have. That's pretty good. I'm impressed. You and Laura are taking off quite well.
I've gotta feel things out a little bit more. My paper is definitely buckly, which I feel like I am going very happy with the water.
Okay. Question I should have asked you before. Are you using 140 pound or 300 pound?
It's 300. It's the
Okay.
arches.
All right. Yeah, because if you're using 140 pound, you can either use it without tape or tape across the top because it has to expand and contract.
Okay.
But 300 pound, you can tape all the way around.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of Arches paper anymore. I used it for years. They changed their formula on the sizing on the paper, which is a protective coat and also the glue that holds the fibers together. And it doesn't allow the watercolor to float long enough anymore because they don't use as much of it. Where
So
I'm using
indigo is better.
Pardon?
Do you think indigo what you recommend? Was that
I feel it's better. I mean, you can use Fabriano or whatever, but the indigo it has a lot of texture and allows the pigment to float longer. That's what I prefer. Other students use the Fabriano or what's the other one? Can't think right now. But it allows the colors to be a little bit more intense sometimes. Let me get this dry here. The next step, again, it's going back into the background as I always do until the background is done. And you can see the amount of color I have on that tree line that goes through the background. It's not one color, but it's many colors showing up, but blending together to a great extent. So I am going to go back into the background first before I go anywhere. And I would like to see a little bit more depth here, a slight bit more. And then I'm going to darken this in over here up against the building here. Not too much though, because the roof and the front of the building, the darks are always darker nearest us. This here has to be darker, but I got to go darker on this eventually also. So I'm going to take the calligraphy brush and I am going to take the burnt sienna with a little bit of the ultramarine blue, but I do want to have it warmed up just a slight bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of the brown matter to it and a little bit more ultramarine blue. There we go. And again, I'm not over mixing it, but I am going to dry the brush off, and I want to start with that stand of trees that are over here. So I'm dropping this in here like so, slowing my process down quite a bit. And this comes down the hill a little bit more. I want a little bit more of a movement here. So I'm adding a little bit more size relationship to this going on. So this kind of goes down the hill a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more water up in here. And I want to add the feeling of some of these lots of twigs before I even put in the tree trunks. I do want to show the mass a little bit more. And I'm going to take the toothbrush at this point, and I'm going to spritz in the feeling of these trees without putting in the tree trunks itself. And I'm going to try to create a variety of open space. So I don't want this to be a solid by any means. So it actually is kind of interpreting the branches that are close together. Then I'll use the toothbrush again. Take a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm going to spritz that in here to give this a little bit more contrast of what's going on up here. And try to vary that at the same time. Now it's a little bit heavier than what I have in the photo, but that's what I really wanted. Now, at the same time, I'm going to take my number 6 round and I'm going to denote some of the trunks of the trees coming up. Just to start. I'll finish them later. But this is just to get a feeling of what's there. And I'll spend a little bit more time on them later, but this will give me the lighter value trunks of the trees to start with. And you take your time with this. And I want to bring the trunks down right in front of the mass of trees that are there already. And I'm being very casual with them. I'm trying not to have the same size trunks or the spacing being the same size or same distance between. But I will darken these up later. This is just the first pass at these trees. So you get a feeling of the grouping of trees without too much effort. I'm going to hold this up so you can see it closer. But very casual. Don't overthink it. Now I'm going to go off to the other side back here. I'm going to start over here, and as I come down, this is going to get progressively lighter so it falls back, because darks get lighter as they go back and lights get darker. So what happens is that the values converge a little bit more. So I'm going to take the ultramarine blue. That's a little bit too much. I'm going to put some over here. And I'm going to take the burnt sienna and a little bit of the brown madder. There we go. Nice, rich, dark brown. I'm going to enhance it from what the photograph is. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dry brush this in. I'm going to be very careful along the ridge of the building here. And I'm also going to take care with this ridge top here because I don't want that to be too straight, too perfect looking. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit of toothbrush up in here. And that will keep that softer. And I'm going to add a little bit more warmth to it in here. And I know just about how this is going to dry, so I'm not overly concerned. Now, when I get down to this point here, I want this to be falling back. So I'm taking just a damp brush and I'm softening that edge so that you can see how it curtails off right here. I am going to add a little bit of burnt sienna back in here. Just a few small brush strokes here and there. And I'm going to bring it right up against the house right here and the foliage. And I'm going to leave that dry to a certain extent, although I'm going to take a little bit of the blue here, straight blue, and I'm going to put it in right up against the house. And I'm going to kind of take a damp brush and just kind of move it out so it kind of accentuates this corner. I'll come up with these trees in a minute. I'm going to kind of soften this up. And I'm going to take and make the front of the house a little bit darker again. This corner here will be darker towards us and it'll get lighter as it goes back. So it looks like it's receding. So I added a little bit of ultramarine blue there just to put it off into the shadow a little bit more. Now, the question is later on, do I want to make the roof darker than the background or do I make it lighter than the background? I'm going to wait and see what happens on this. And I'm also going to go ahead and put in the shadow for this. So it starts to build the house up just a little bit more. And then back here, I'm going to leave the front alone. At this point, I want to go into the adding these trees in here just a little bit. So I'm going to take the burnt sienna, the ultramarine blue, and a little bit of the brown matter. Have my paper towel ready. And I'm going to bring up some of the, and I'm bringing them all the way up to the top of the paper here. This is a little bit warmer than these are over here. And I'm not bringing them up too equally for the fact that I want open gaps here and there. And then a few dry brushes of touches down in here to create a little bit different movement through the area. Like so. And I want to get this a little bit darker underneath the eaves right here in the front. And then while this is drying, I'm going to kind of drag this down into the house because we've got kind of a vine thing going on there, which I don't want to do too much with the vine, but I want to give this a little bit of character in the foreground. Now I'm going to dress the house in the back. I'm also going to tone that roof down because it's way too light. So I'm taking the ultramarine blue with a little bit of that brown here. And I'm going to make this a little bit of a cooler roof. So it will be different than the roof that's here. I'm not going to cover the whole thing. And we got a little bit of a cast shadow underneath here. I'm going to allow it to bleed in so that it just sort of falls back. And then the house itself, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow with the blue, with a lot of water. So it will relate to the grass a little bit more. So that house is being toned down quite a bit from the actual photograph. You're always going to make adjustments from the photograph to the painting. So what I did is I came over here and I added dry brush up in here with the side of the brush. And I added the trunks of the trees in to start with. I'll make them a little bit more prominent later. What I want to do is I want to soften, because now that it's dry, I want to take just a damp brush and soften up this edge here because it's too sharp, and it gets too sharp as it goes back. So take a paper towel and I'm softening that up. Those sharper edges will attract the eye in the wrong way most of the time. Then I jumped across here and I darkened this section up with the burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine, touch of the brown matter. And then I warmed this up a little bit more and I started with the trees going up. Then I added more dark to this. I added a little bit of, I'm going to darken this in again, but I added a little bit of texture to this side of the house so that this house becomes different than this one. And I toned down the roof with a little bit of blue and a little bit of the, I believe the burnt sienna, just a slight bit. And I made this a little bit warmer, not so light. People would have a tendency of putting in the telephone poles and so forth. I prefer them to be off the grid right now, but we'll leave this dry and I will show you how to lift out texture in the next phase and handle the foreground. So I'm going to leave that dry before I take a picture of it. And again, I'm cleaning off my mixing area so I don't end up with muddy color. Because there's a lot of work in the foreground green area that has to be addressed in the next phase. And you noticed I haven't addressed hardly any detail. Detail is always last. And I think warming up the roof a little bit more on the more forward building will have a better effect on the painting. Because sometimes things are too dark or too light in a photograph that you have to adjust. But if you have any questions, please yell. And let me get a picture of this. I'm going to go rinse out my sponges. I'll be right back. Any questions at all? Remember, don't overhandle it. Keep things simple at all costs.
Dale, is there anything I should change?
Um, at this point, no. I'm going to show you, starting off again, what I'm going to do back here. That can be lightened a little bit, but I want to show you how to do it.
Okay.
But you're fine.
Okay.
Don't touch it.
Oh,
How you doing, Catherine?
I'm doing. I think I might be at a stopping point, but I'm open to some input.
Okay. Hold it up a little bit higher if you could. All right. No, I think you're doing fairly well. The next phase, I'm going to handle this green in here in the background and the trees. But I think you're doing quite well. I'm going to show you how to lighten. This could be a little bit lighter back here, which I'll show you how to do that so it falls back. But you're doing well.
Thank you.
For being so-called rusty all these time. Not bad at all.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the encouragement.
Well, I think encouragement always goes a long ways if you're going in the right direction. I have occasionally told a student to start over, so you're doing really well.
Okay.
I've told students in my workshops that I do in person because I have the advantage of walking around class and seeing what they're doing. But I have told a few students in the past, I think you better start over because they had been a little bit too forceful.
Mhm.
But you're doing fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right. What I want to do is I'm going to take the paper towel and my wet brush here, and I want to soften by picking this up a little bit, I want to soften this ridge. It's coming forward a little bit too much. So I want that to fall back. So we do this by taking a damp brush and kind of, I'm going to use the word massaging the paper a little bit. nothing too aggressive at this point. Okay, now there's a place right back in here. I'm not really touching this in here because this sort of fades back, and you want this to be very soft edge back here so it does fall back. But I do want to lighten up a little bit in here to make an opening. And have it extend over a little bit. Again, take the paper towel and I'm lifting that up just to allow a little bit of light back in here. Not that it's in the photograph, but again, we're not painting the photograph. I just want a little bit of variety of value back there, just a slight bit. Okay, now I'm going to take my two smallest brushes at this point. I'm going to start handling the trees and come forward again. So I have a small brush called a rigger. It's very long and narrow. It's my smallest brush I use. I don't use it in a constant use. I'm always adjusting things, but this I do use occasionally. So I'm going to address these trees over here. And I'm going to take the ultramarine blue and a little bit of the brown matter. And I want to make a few of the trees, not all of them, but a few of the trees a little bit more dominant. The ones that are that are going to be lighter will fall back. So I'm going to start right in this section right here. And I'm making them a little bit darker so they kind of come forward. I'm going to bring the stems right down into the foreground here, or the midground. And I'm going to take my time doing this, making some trees more defined a little bit more than others. I'm not making them all straight. I'm making some of them lean into the picture, especially off on the right-hand side here, so that they're not allowing the eye to fall out the right-hand side. So this is being put on top to allow the rest of them to fall back. And I'm being very conscious to space them at different intervals so they don't look like they were planted by the farmer in perfect rows. I'll hold this up closer to the camera in a second. And I allow them to stop and start at different places down here so that they're not all the same. The best thing you can do is try to get as much variety in as you can without going crazy. A little bit goes a long ways. And this should suffice for the main part of the trees here. Because if you put too much work in on it, it's going to be too noticeable. So you want something that is there like a character actor in a movie, but he's not going to be the star of the movie. So think of it in that way. So I'm going to take this smaller brush here, and I'm going to take a little bit more of the burnt sienna and dry the brush off just a slight bit. And I'm going to put in some of the finer handlings of the trees. Not a lot, but just enough to kind of finish them off a little bit more. And again, those can be adjusted as need be throughout the painting, but I didn't want to overdo it. Let me hold this up so that you can see it a little bit better. And then I'll jump to the other side, and I'm not going to overdo these over here. And I'm trying to make this section here larger than this over here as far as individual trees go. So I'm being very careful to show that variety. Because once you start making it equal, the eye doesn't know where to go. So I'm going to put in they're going to be darker over here. Because I don't want them the same. And it helps break up the sky a little bit. Then I'll go to the smaller brush. And dry the brush off a little bit. And I will put in some of the smaller, finer branches that are in here. Change value a little bit, make this a little bit darker. And then what I'll do is I'll take the toothbrush with a little bit more burnt sienna in with the mixture. And I'm going to spray just a little bit up in here just to give this a little bit of more of a solid looking feeling here. And it's different than what the photograph is, but I feel that it's needed. And I'm going to add a little bit off over here also. Not too much. Okay, now I want to address the grass. And how I'm going to do that first is I'm going to lift a little bit. I got a 1-inch flat here. I've had this brush a long time. And I want to lighten up the crown of this grass, and I want to soften the edges just a little bit more. So I'm kind of massaging the paper a little bit. Not equally everywhere, but just enough to, because I'm not going to do the same softening all the way up. But I just want to bring that a little bit softer in there, and then down in here just a little bit. And then I have where this comes down to the ground a little bit more. I'm going to lighten this because when you have a horizontal surface, when the light's coming from above, you're going to have it receive a little bit more light. So this is getting a little bit more light down here than this part right in here, which is kind of facing away from the light. And what I want to do over here is I want to give this a little bit of light back in here to separate it from the background just a little bit. Not much. And then just a little bit down in here. Okay, now I'm going to soften. You got some hard edges right back there that are attracting the eye a little bit too much, so I'm going to soften that out. And I'm also going to define the road just a little bit more back here. Not too much. Now, I'm going to go into the grasses on the hill here and the bush and the grass over here. The last thing I'm addressing is the house, or the two houses, because I'm building that up to that. So I'm going to address it over here first. So I'm going to take the sap green right in with the brown and the blue that I've previously mixed up. And I'm going to tap it off on the paper towel. And I'm going to put in the darkness of the ridge here and there. Using the side of the brush, the point of the brush. So it starts to have a little bit more value changes in here. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to it so it warms it up as it comes over here. A little bit darker. Want a little bit dark up in here. And then soften it. Many times I'll put something down and then I will take a brush and soften it in. And since this is getting a little bit too light over here, I'm going to darken it in because the eye is attracted to contrast of value, lightest light, darkest dark in that area. And that way we don't see too much of that going on. And a little bit along the road here. Then I'm going to take the toothbrush while it's still wet with a little bit of ultramarine in it, mixed in with what I already have here. And I'm going to put down a little bit of spattering of this up in here. Then I'm just going to take water and make sure it kind of spreads out a little bit more. That way I'm not touching the paper too much. Because every time you touch the paper, it will lift the watercolor a little bit. And I'm going to put in a few little saplings coming out of here, even though it's not in the picture. And they're not going to be prominent by any means, but they're still there basically. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow. Take a little bit of the blue to tone it down. And I'm going to spritz that in here, just a slight bit, and alongside the road here. Just to add some flowers. A little bit up on top here. Adds a little bit of character. Then I'm going to jump over to the other side. I'm going to take a little bit of the green with the blue I have here. A little bit of the burnt sienna. And I am going to tap it off on a paper towel. And I'm going to make this quite dark in here. It's receiving less light. Take a little bit more burnt sienna here, and I'm going to put it right up against the house. And I want to darken the roof in while I've got that on my brush up towards us a little bit more. And as it goes back, it has a little bit more light to it. And I'm going to pull that dark right up into here. And I'm using more of a brownish green than I am what's in the photograph because it's a little bit too dark for me in the photograph. I'm going to take a little bit more green. And again, I don't want to put in too many things that are off to the side here. But I do want to give it a little bit more form because if I put in too much here, again, your eye's attracted to it. So I'm being very careful to kind of keep that more ambiguous looking. And I'm using a little bit of dark back in here, and I'm going to add a little bit of texture here into the foreground. I'm going to use a little bit of dark on the other side of the house here. just to sort of push it out. And if we had flowers on one side of the highway, they got to jump to the other side. So I'm adding a little bit over here. Now, at the same point, I am going to put the windows of the house in. And I'm going to take the blue and the brown here a little bit. And I'm going to put in the feeling of what's underneath here. This has got to be a little bit darker. And so does this. But it's not as dark as that is over there. And then it comes along the roof line here. And then I'm going to kind of soften that down a little bit. Now, the only time you have really dark windows is when there's no glass in them, because it's not reflecting anything. So I have to be kind of careful about that. And I'm trying to make each window a little bit different. Now, I'm going to take this really light yellow-brown here, and I'm going to go around the windows, the mullions itself, so that they will seem a little bit lighter around the window. Not too much. This needs to be toned down just a little bit. And I'm going to take the toothbrush with a little bit of this green, and I'm going to put it right down at the bottom here, just so it blends. And I'm going to bring it up a little bit. And then I'm going to go into the front of the house. We've got a window here, and we've got a doorway right here. And we got a window up above it. And I'm not really doing too much on the size or whatever. I am just trying to make them look like they're there without too much work. I had a little bit of blue here in this one. And I have a little bit of dark underneath here. And this still has a little bit more dark. So if I overdo the house to make it look too neat and clean, it's going to take away from the old look of it. I'm going to go to the back building here. I wanted this one to look a little bit cleaner, so there's a contrast. I want to put in the chimney. And I think I had it right here. And we have a little bit of a cast shadow going off. And this one, I put a chimney back here on this house just for the fun of it. This has got to be neatened up a little bit there. And I put a chimney right here with a little bit of a cast shadow going off of it like so. And I'm going to take a little bit of that light brown that I have here, tan, and this is too much the same. I want to tone this down just a little bit, especially up against the house. Now I'm going to take a little bit of that green with the yellow and tap it off on the paper towel. And I want to add a little bit of texture out front. I also want to make sure this road bends a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of dark along the edge of the road here. And a tad more blue on this here. Just to tone it down, because it's too warm, it's going to come forward. If it's cool, it will fall back. Now, when that dries just for a minute, I'm going to take the toothbrush just with water in it, and I'm going to add a little bit of texture back in here. By adding water to it, I can then go in and pull up just a little bit of texture up in here. And I'm going to take a little bit of this bluish color, and I'm going to add a little bit of character to the road. And I want to run a cast shadow across the road right in front, just to tone it down a little bit. And the last thing, we have some squatters in this house up front, and they got a fire burning. So I'm adding a little bit of smoke. And I'm going to bring that right up into the sky here. Oops. My brush just went into the wrong color.
Uh-oh. What are they burning?
Blue tires.
Oh. Well, at least it's not smudged.
Really. Shouldn't be bothersome too much. And then just allow it to tail off. And I think I need a little bit more lift up towards the house. Like so. A little bit of lightness hitting here. And I'm just lifting a little bit of the clapboards there, not too much. And I'm going to take a little bit of this dark green, put my hand down, and I'm going to put some texture out in front so it doesn't go on the house. And the last thing is I want to bring a tree crossing the house. Right about here, coming up from the foreground. And these are things that I feel that can be added. Not a big tree. And what I'll do is I will take the 1-inch brush and I will lift out some lighter branches into the dark. I don't like this branch here, so I'm going to soften it. Bring in a few saplings at the bottom. And I think we can call this a day. That way you'll have plenty of time to paint on it. So I'm going to take the tape off to see what it really looks like, because the tape does influence the painting to a certain degree. And I'll probably paint a little bit more on this after class, but this one here, not too much. I like the simplicity of it. But you'll get that in the video also. I'll put that up on the water bucket so it's closer to you. But you can see on how I'm pulling the tape away from the painting, by the way. You can see on how this, taking the tape off, does reflect back into the painting to a certain degree. There's one thing I want to do while we got this open, is I want to put in a few ruts through here. It'll help move the eye a little bit. So you can see with the white tape removed on how that white paper does give it an idea of a mat on it. So that gives you about a half hour to paint if you wish. Or we can leave early and you can take me to lunch. Rinse my sponges out and I'll be right back. Any questions at all? Remember, try not to overhandle it. What you can always do is take a snapshot of this if you don't finish it and see where I ended up, and then I will shoot the rest of the video with minor handling probably as extra.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. Anybody need to show me something?
Still working on it, but so far that's how it's coming out.
All right, that's good. You can still soften the edges of the road
Okay.
intermittently, not all the way, of course, but it's coming along nice.
Okay.
That's
Cool.
good.
Thank you.
What do you have, Catherine?
I'll just show you where I'm at for now. I've got more.
And you want to lift it up a little bit higher? That's pretty good. I like it. It's coming along nice. I'm looking at, you can soften the edges of your road further back in here.
Okay.
And bring it a little bit closer to the camera if you could for a minute. All right, that's good, yeah. And you can add a little bit more yellow green through here.
Okay.
That's good. It's coming along nice. And you say you haven't painted in a long time, huh?
I love painting though, so I'm so excited to be making time for it again.
Oh, that's good. On this one here, I'm probably going to do just small touches in the finished part of the video that we'll send you. Nothing major. So you can take a screenshot of it if you wish.
Yeah, this the road softer now.
Yeah, that's a little bit better. Good.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'll probably have to finish up the house then after we get the recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good weekend.
Bye. Talk to you all next week.
Have a good, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. You too.
Tell your husband to take you out to a nice place.
Oh, I will.
Good.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I can sign off too. I'll keep working on mine as well.
Okay, go slow on it. Don't overwork it.
Okay, sounds good. Anything to work on before next week other than,
At this point, no.
okay.
Happy
All right.
All right.
Have a happy Valentine's Day.
You too. Thank you so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. I'm going to go and finish this up, and I'm going to work around this area here, maybe a little bit up in the trees, and then come back to the house. So I'm going to close in on the focal point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray a little bit of water first to get some textures going. I need just a little bit more texture. And I just hit it with the toothbrush with water. And then I'm going to pull up. Just need to break up a few things here, adjust a few things. It's just a matter of adjusting some of the secondary masses. And I'm going to start with the Chinese brush here. Take a little bit of ultramarine blue and just a touch of the brown matter. There we go. Now the brown matter will automatically gray things down because it has a little bit of burnt sienna in it. So I am going to come up into here and I'm going to add just a little sweeping movement of this blue up in here. It's all minor things at this point. I want to add a little bit more blue back in here. All small points though at this point. Now I'm going to come down into the grassiness in here. Again, I'm mixing in some of the green right in with what I've already mixed up. You'll find me doing that quite a bit. And I want to come in here and define just a little bit more dark up in this area here. So I'm adding punctuation of some darks, some darker accents. And I want to add a little bit of warmth up in here. And all I'm doing is I'm dry brushing this in so that we get a little bit more feeling of texture, and add a little bit of green down in the lower right-hand side here. And I want to tone this down a little bit too light. So that is basically a stronger block of color. And I want to add a little bit back in here. So it's a matter of toning down some of the lights that I feel are not that important. So I've got some nice grayed down green here. I want to put that over in here so that this will not be as noticed as it is now. Then I'm going to take that same color with a little bit more burnt sienna in it. And I want to put in a little bit of warmth on the ground here. And I want to do a little bit of a punctuation of raw color here. Sometimes you'll see me put things down and then kind of pull it up a little bit. Just adding just enough accent to this. It's a lot of the minor touches at this point. Add a little bit back in here. So I'm moving around equally around this painting. And I want to strengthen a few of these trees. Just a couple of them. So they come out just a little bit more. We don't want them popping out a lot, but they will come forward a little bit more and give us a little bit more of a contrast of value that we need at this point. That brings that out a little bit more. I'm going to take a little bit of that color and add it in as accents of darks on this ridge. I'll take a little bit of the green and some of the yellow. Add a little bit of extra color in here and definitely over here. And the direction of the brushstroke becomes somewhat important. And I'm leading it down to the road here. So my movement is quite a bit along with the line of the slope. And it's always very important to paint with a directional movement or paint in the direction of the way the slope is. No. Okay. I need to darken up the front of the house. So I'm taking a little bit of burnt sienna, some of the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to do a wash across the house, the very front of it. It was a little bit too light back here. And I'm anticipating, as I told you before, how light this is going to dry. I'm trying to make this look a little bit more rugged. And this one needs a little bit more warmth to it back here. So I'm painting around the window itself. I'll allow that to bleed in. That doesn't hurt anything. Put a few brush strokes there to indicate some rubble. And then I'm going to come in. Sometimes you see things after you're done. You're not done until you're done, basically. But I wanted to soften this edge right up in there. And I'll work with the windows in a minute. I'm going to strengthen this tree out here a little bit. And I think I'm going to put another one right in here, a small one. Now, up in here, I want to kind of delineate a little bit of movement up in here. I need to add a few so I am going to add some of the clapboards in here. I'm going to take some of the brown and a little bit of the blue. Dry the brush off. And I'm just tapping the brush down on the side of the house. Not everywhere equally, but just enough to give this a little bit of character on that side. It's too much, you always got that paper towel to pull it up. And I'm going to do the same thing on the front of the house, but not as visible. Now, let's get a little bit of blue on here. I'm going to do a little bit of detail on the back house and then come forward. Taking a little bit of burnt sienna and some of the brown matter here. Then I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue and the brown matter, and I'm going to go in and excuse me, I'll go in and I'm going to make the windows a little bit darker. They'll give them a little bit more depth. I'm still trying to keep it on the casual side. And underneath the eaves here. And then underneath the eaves here. Put it down. You can always pull it up a little bit. And I'm going to take a little bit of blue green and I'm going to run some shadows across the house here. Going to make the chimney a little bit darker. That kind of faded into oblivion up here. And the cast shadow coming off of that. And I'm going to make the roof just a little bit more textured. So I'm going to take the side of the brush, tone down that back a little bit. Then come in and make the windows just a little bit stronger. So that they are a little bit better portrayed. Then I'm going to take the green that's out here, mix it in with what I just used the windows for. And this needs to be a little bit darker because it should be in shadow. This is the shadow side of the building. And since I have this building here real close, I'm going to run a bit of a cast shadow across it and then up and over the roof. Just a slight bit. Now, once this has dried just a little bit, which I think it has, I'm going to take just water on my brush and I'm going to lift the framing around just with a little bit, just to denote the framing around the windows. So I put water on it and take a paper towel and keep on lifting it up. So there are corrections and so forth that can be done. And I'm going to see if I can lift up that smoke a little bit. Like I say, there wasn't a lot to be done. I'm going to get some of these spatter marks out. They're not that bothersome, but I don't need some of these bigger ones up here. Let's see if I can get that smoke a little bit more distinctive. It's a matter of having patience at this point. But this house now has a little bit more character in it than what it had before. And take the smaller 6 round, pull up some of this brownish color that I've created. And just sort of let it drift off into the background here. I want to bring back some of the yellow that I had in here. Give it a little bit more of a spring feel. Pumps the color up just a tad, and that's what I'm looking for. And then I want to pull out some of these branches against the dark up in here. So I'm just using water and putting it down as a line that I can lift up exactly what I want to show. Not a lot. You don't want it overpowering, but just enough to give a little bit of value difference here. And I want to take a little bit of the yellow, very, very lightly, lots of water. I want to put it along the ridge up in here. Lots of water. Sometimes if you work it, your painting just a little bit longer after you sit back and look at it for a while, you can add a certain amount of character to the painting that you feel is necessary. I like the way this just fades back. And I think I can use a stronger cast shadow in here. I didn't want the road going all the way to the end without some sort of interruption to it. That's better. Bring some of that color down. A few accents of blue here and there. And I think we're pretty close to being finished. Because I don't want to overdo it too much. But I do want to add a little bit of character on the side of the house with a cast shadow. Maybe just tone down that back there. But it's always good to get up off your seat and look at it for a while so you can see certain things. And I'm toning down the bottom of the house with cast shadow of these high grasses and so forth. And give the foreground a little bit more texture. It was a little flat before. But when you're demonstrating and talking, my main concern is that you understand how to handle the watercolor and how to proceed through the painting. This is all aesthetics, not the technical. Okay, let me look at it for a second here. And from the photograph, toning this down becomes somewhat important. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of light inside this window here, as there might be a window on the other side of the building. Adjust this side of the roof just a little bit. Little accents of texture here and there. And I think we're pretty close to being done. A couple light trunk trees back here. Give it a little bit of variety of value. Not equally, just helps break it up just a little bit. And I think that's where we'll call it. Because otherwise one could get carried away. All we need is signature. And I think we're done. So it wasn't really that much left to do. And I'm going to take a look at it before I turn the video off. And I'm looking at one more thing. There's always one more thing. I'll take some of this pure yellow, and I am going to add, not that, just a little bit of and I think that will do it. So backing up, I added a little bit more to the trees. I added some yellow in the sky, and then I built this up with a little bit more texture so that it moves a little bit better. And I added a little bit more strength to this tree. My main thing was working on the building. I added a little bit more definition to the smoke. And I added more texture and movement into the ground out in front, a little bit alongside the building. And I think we're going to leave it at that. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.